Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. We're here for another morning briefing. I am your host, John McGinley. I'm joined by Ryan McGinley today. We're here to chat through various Celtic issues. It's an increasingly exciting and busy time for Celtic on various fronts. The League Cup tomorrow. There's been 2 league matches already. We've got a Champions League tie on the horizon. It's all happening, Ryan.
Certainly is. Do you know, you think back to how long those summer months were when you were discussing even pre-season games, and now we're into the nitty-gritty of the season. Despite the lack of transfer action, I'm delighted that the season's back and now in full swing. Looking forward to heading over to the game tomorrow. The last game against Falkirk was pretty entertaining for both sides, I would say, so looking forward to another good game tomorrow night. But yeah, happy to be back into the swing of things.
Yeah, there's various things happening today. Obviously, because Celtic are playing on a Friday night this week, today is press conference day for Celtic, so there will be a player up doing a media conference later, as well as Brendan Rodgers. So we're going to hear from Brendan Rodgers today. You don't usually hear from him on a Thursday. It's usually a Friday, but it is today. So there's going to be plenty of news coming out this afternoon regarding that. Obviously, we don't have that available yet. So if you're watching this later, apologies if it's a little bit out of date and Brendan Rodgers has said something that everyone's speaking about, but that's the way it is. This morning, what we're going to be talking about is basically Celtic's squad depth for this European tie. A couple of explainers around the UEFA rules and the UEFA deadlines. Just initially, Ryan, just to make it clear for yourself and everyone, and I know you're aware, but tonight is the initial UEFA deadline for the playoff round that Celtic have to register their squad. So it's 11 o'clock tonight, UK time, that the squad has to be registered. We'll all find out about what that squad is over the coming days. Celtic have until 11 o'clock the day before the first leg to register 2 more players at the expense of two in the initial squad that's registered. So it's not a firm deadline in terms of new signings, but all the mood music, all the signs are that Celtic are going to go forward with the squad that they have for this 2-legged tie. It doesn't seem like there's any signings, imminent or anything happening. There's been a dearth of reports around Celtic's transfer activity, and every time Brendan Rodgers has spoken over the last while, he's given no indication that anything's imminent either.
Yeah, it's been the same sort of stock answer from Brendan Rodgers, that he's hoping that players come in rather than anything happening imminently, which is frustrating for a multitude of people, both for the supporters that are looking for new signings through the door and for us, because we want to talk about signings just as much as the supporters want to talk about signings coming through the door. So it is frustrating in that aspect. It seems as if Celtic are going to be bringing in new players, they'll use that 24 hours before deadline to register them into the club, because, as you said, there seems to be nothing at the moment. There's nothing imminent in terms of new players that would be signed, sealed and delivered before 11 o'clock this evening. So you would hope that there's maybe a couple, maybe 1 or 2 players in before that, but it would seem that it would, their actions or lack of actions recently would suggest that they are going to go with the team or the squad that they've got just now, and they're backing the players. They're backing the players already present at the club to actually get through this tie against Kairat, which is risky, but at the same time, I guess it shows the confidence that Brendan Rodgers has in his players at that same time. Although he would ideally want new players through the door as soon as possible.
So we've been obviously regularly on this show complaining about the lack of transfers. A lot of fans have been complaining about the lack of transfers, but I guess we're at the situation now where, look, this is what Celtic have now, and this is what Celtic are moving forward with. So I guess the Champions League tie for me certainly very much takes a front seat, and all this transfer activity takes a back seat in my head. I'm sure Brendan Rodgers was indicating that in media last week, kind of saying he's very much focused on what he's got rather than what he could get, which I think is the right way to go about it from his perspective too. So in that spirit, Ryan, I just thought I'd put together a little squad depth graphic and explain some of the registration rules. Now, if you play Football Manager, for instance, you might be well familiar with how the UEFA registration rules work in terms of homegrown players. You have to, in a 25-man squad, you're allowed up to 25 people in the squad. Out of that, 8 of them have to be homegrown in nation, as in Scotland, and 4 of those have to be homegrown by the club, as in trained by Celtic between the ages of 15 or any 18, I think it is. So here's the squad depth we've got at the moment. Apologies if you're squinting to read this, but I will read it out as I go. So this is the squad depth as it stands. And apologies if I've missed anything obvious, but this is the squad depth as it stands for me. I've tried to include the summer signings. I know Callum Osman's not really been involved in the first team, but I've thrown them in there just for completion's sake. I've got Jota there just to show that he obviously still is within the squad, but I've put an X beside his name because he's clearly injured until the new year. The players in green, they're the players who are homegrown by Celtic. Luke McCowan in orange there is homegrown in Nation. There's 7 of those players in total, so there would have to be an inclusion from maybe one of the academy prospects or just a man left out of the squad. It would be a 24-man squad in that case. But this is what Celtic are working with at the moment. Some of these players won't make the UEFA deadline because there's more than the 24 or 25 that Celtic can register with UEFA. Marco Tilio, for example, who seems to be waiting on a move to Austria, I'd be surprised if he's included in the UEFA squad. And yeah, this is what we're working with. I'd be surprised if Callum Osman's included in the UEFA squad as well. How are you feeling about this, Ryan? What are the strengths here, and what are the deficiencies here?
Oh, I've muted myself there, sorry about that. What I would say is that instantly straight off the bat, I think that Celtic have done a good job in managing their homegrown players, and I say that specifically with the likes of Ross Doohan coming to the club and Kieran Tierney. 2 players that can tick both boxes are really handy for Celtic, especially when they're putting together that 25-man squad. There's also players that, if they don't get a move, can come in and have that and give Celtic that option. The likes of Stephen Welsh, although I think his future probably lies elsewhere, which is why he's not included in the graph, because there has been dialogue over, or certainly there's been rumours that he might leave the club this summer. Just looking at the squad as a whole, I think that the midfield and certainly the centre back positions, centre midfield and centre back look really strong. Plenty of depth there. Good to see Jemai Simpson-Pusey in there. I think he'll play a big role for Celtic. The full-backs, apart from maybe a second choice left back, look really good. Johnson and Ralston, you can rely on them. Kieran Tierney, of course, you can rely on. The only question mark will be his long-term fitness, but hopefully as he gets more game time, he'll be available for more and more games and can play longer. But I think despite the numbers up front in the striking position, and I know there's 4 players mentioned, it's not nearly as strong as what I would want it to be. I don't think there's anybody really screaming out there as being the first choice striker. Despite Adam Ida starting the first 2 games, he's looked pretty off form at this moment in time. Shin Yamada's an unknown quantity. Kenny signed a new deal, but he's not. We don't know if he's going to stay at the club or go out on loan this summer. And then the wing positions, they need to be improved as well, especially with Jota. I think the squad registration will actually provide a hint into Jota's long-term fitness and how he's getting on.
I mean, Rodgers has said it's going to be till the new year, so he's not. Yeah, he's not going to be part of it. Certainly for this tie, I wouldn't expect him to be part of it. For the league phase
obviously, because you can change. Yeah. You can change for the league phase. That's I guess I was meaning more down the line, but obviously Jota won't feature in this. But I just think if Celtic, or regardless of what European competition Celtic play in, if Jota's included in that, then there might be a hope that he can play in some of the January games, which would be an added bonus, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the right wing area is just not good enough. And I think that Celtic haven't addressed that as a pretty key failing of this transfer window. I think when you consider that Nicholas Kuhn, he seemed destined to be leaving this summer for months. I think when you look at Jota's injury occurring in April, I don't think Celtic have done enough in that wing area. Now, people will point, James Forrester's experience, he has a bit of qualities, that he's done things in Europe for Celtic before, but he's not the starting right winger for Celtic last year in European competition. And I think if you look at Nicholas Kuhn's impact in the Champions League, now there was a chance where we're going to play Slovan Bratislava in this tie. Even if you look at that 5-1 game against Slovan Bratislava, Nicholas Kuhn was massive in that game. A real key influence and as you say, instrumental towards the result. And I think when we're considering facing a team at this level, again, this is the biggest game in Kairat's history. I think we really need more quality in those forward areas. And this is stuff everyone knows. I'm just illustrating this because this looks to be the squad that Celtic are moving forward with into this tie. And I think that Celtic's failure to strengthen this attacking front three has been a real problem. And again, we've discussed at length about what the reasons for that might be and what the hold-up is. I did a long video with Hamish just regarding how Celtic see their strategy and how recruitment works at Celtic, so check that out in the channel if you haven't. But ultimately, I think Celtic have failed to strengthen their attacking options, and I think that's a concern going into this tie. I think Celtic should have enough to take care of Kairat. There's no doubt about that, but I think it's just one of those things where it feels like we're taking a risk that maybe Celtic didn't need to take.
Yeah, certainly in that striking and right wing areas or positions, I think those are two risky moves from the club, because James Forrest is dependable. It's good that he seems to have gotten over his injury problems over the past couple of years, and I think against both Aberdeen and St Mirren, you could make an argument for him being one of Celtic's best players in those two games, because I thought he looked really, really sharp. Picking and choosing his runs and causing havoc, as I said in my player ratings against Aberdeen. I thought he caused Nicky Devlin all sorts of problems for the duration of the game, or the duration he was on the park. But yeah, it's not an ideal situation having to rely on him, or bringing in Yang as well, whose form can go up and down even within a game, not just within games that he plays, but you never know what you're going to get with Yang, unfortunately. Kuhn's a massive miss, as you said. Slovan Bratislava, he was instrumental in that game. Not just Slovan Bratislava, but other games as well. He was a bit of a talisman in Europe for Celtic, a bit of a player that Celtic could rely on to make things happen, both in goals and assists. He did it against Bayern Munich, did it against RB Leipzig, obviously Bratislava as well. So that's a position that has been weakened. It's not as if you've brought in a player and you don't know how he's going to do compared to Nicholas Kuhn. You've just not brought in a player at all. So regardless of what way anybody dresses it up, that right wing position is weaker than what it was last season, which is a little bit of a concern. But it's been a concern for the past month or so, and it's not been dealt with as of yet.
Just going back to the graphic now, this is just illustrative. It's so it's slightly reductive in a sense. So for instance, we know that Hayato Inamura's not really been involved in that left-back position. In fact, if Tierney has needed to come off in games, it's been Liam Scales that's switched over to the left with Austin Trusty coming in. We've not really seen anything of Jemai Simpson-Pusey yet. We don't know how involved he's going to be, but the suspicion is that he will be playing first-team football for Celtic this season. And just in the midfield as well, we know that Arne Engels can kind of cover for Callum McGregor in a pinch, although it's not ideal. Paulo Bernardo can play deeper as well. So there's a fair bit of rotation between that midfield three too. So just a caveat for people looking on at this who think we've not considered that, but when you're putting together a graphic, it can be quite reductive where everyone is placed. But that's as it stands. That's what Celtic are moving forward with, and that's the job that Brendan Rodgers needs to do with this squad now. And listen, how are you feeling about Kairat in general? Are you worried about this tie? I don't think I'm particularly worried, Ryan. I think it's going to be a tough test. I don't think Celtic can take anything for granted here, but should be taking care of this team, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were putting this in the context of if Celtic were in the league phase against Kairat, this would be one of the games that you would circle, if Celtic were drawn against Kairat, obviously, as this is a game that they have to win in order to get to the next stage of the competition. There is no two ways about it. A point wouldn't be good enough against sides like this. You've got to get the 3 points. For me, yes, you've got the big long journey to Kazakhstan in the second leg. And Callum McGregor and Brendan Rodgers kind of alluded to it yesterday in the interviews that they did with Celtic TV, that they want to do a lot of their business in the first leg of the game, really get that advantage against Kairat, and then get most of the job done if they can. Obviously, games can change as they play them, but ideally you would want Celtic to build up a lead ahead of the second leg, and then maintain that as they go over to Kazakhstan with the time differences and the heat over there, and the jet lag that will be there with going to Kazakhstan. So yeah, the first leg is going to be important. I would want Celtic to build up, if they can, a healthy lead and make it as easy as possible. There's always a risk in these games, regardless of who you play against. Kairat obviously deserve to be here because of the teams that they've beaten. I think they've actually came through. Was it the first qualifying round? So they've played a number of times to get up to this point.
What they've done, Ryan, they've beat the Slovenian champions, they beat the Finnish champions, and they beat the Slovakian champions. So they've been on a fair run. This is just such a massive game for them, and the history of their club. It's a massive game for Kazakhstan football, and all those are factors. And listen, I think important to note as well, we all talk about the trip Celtic have to make. They also have to make a large trip to Celtic Park. And the hope is that Celtic, I think, can hit them flat-footed to an extent at Celtic Park next Wednesday night. I mean, that is the hope. I think the fans will very much be up for it. The fans will be very supportive of the team and really be getting behind the team. You know, despite all the grumbling this summer, I don't think that connection between the fans and the players has changed. And I think it'll be a great atmosphere, and everyone will be so up for it. I'm going to bring in some of your comments here. Let us know how you're feeling about the squad depth in the tie in general. I'll try to bring some of them in. We do have some of them already. Son of Scotland 67 saying, we start every window thinking we need 5 signings, but we have been reduced now to thinking, please just buy a striker. If the Champions League tie goes wrong, there will be pitchforks in the car park. Jason Mudgard making a good point here. Rodgers loves wide players. It's unimaginable he's only got 3 covering both wings. And listen, that's a decent point as well. And while I've included Tellio here, I don't expect Tellio to get any game time at all at Celtic anytime soon. So you really do have 3 players covering 2 wide positions, James Forrest, Yang and Daizemeda. And it's a good point about Brendan Rodgers. He does like his wide players. They are so crucial to the way that he deploys his system and his attacking system. So I think that you don't have new blood there, I think is a real issue. Just more comments here. Brian Lennon's making a fair point about James Forrest. Always liked James Forrest, but it's only recently most Celtic fans appreciate him, and we'd be lost without him. He never gives the ball away. He's a great footballer. I think Forrest has actually been very good in the first 2 games, and that is worth noting. I think in general, though, when you're thinking about the summer and you think back a year ago, James Forrest was not a first choice starter for Celtic, and he just wasn't. And so the fact that he is now indicates that Celtic have weakened to an extent. Tam PTV saying he disagrees. Ryan, don't think overall we will miss Kuhn despite his European performances. However, it's an absolute dereliction of duty on behalf of the Celtic board to have not signed a replacement. I think, over time, whether Celtic have a Kuhn absence has to be told, but as it stands, without the signings in the door, I really do think Celtic miss Kuhn at the moment. Could Celtic make a sign in that area and that guy becomes as productive and as exciting as Nicholas Kuhn? Undoubtedly. And then at that point you're thinking, we're not missing Nicholas Kuhn. But as it stands, as the squad stands now, I do think Celtic are badly missing Nicholas Kuhn.
You take double digits of goals and assists away from the team, that's clearly going to hurt the team's attacking play. It's an annoying situation because Kuhn was sold so early in the window. Before, I don't even think Como had played a pre-season game, and Kuhn was away. I don't know, was there an insistence from the player that he had to leave the club so early on? If that was the case, then surely the ball should have been rolling in motion for a player to come in. And be that replacement for Nicholas Kuhn ahead of these Champions League qualifiers. I know he did have that dip, but he was still contributing with goals and assists. Maybe his overall performances weren't great after the Bayern Munich game. He still had a couple of really good ones here and there, but those goals and assists, you take them out of the team, that coupled with the fact that you're still trying to replace Matt O'Reilly's goals that you lost the season before as well. Yeah, it hurts the team, and I know people might have mixed feelings on Nicholas Kuhn, on his temperament, on the way that he played, on the way he was off the pitch. Some people have certain opinions on him, but I think you miss a player like that, somebody that's dynamic and can do that on a game-by-game basis. I think James Forrest is actually, despite not being as dynamic as what he used to be in terms of his pace and power, I actually think he's a better footballer than what he was when he was 26, 27, because he picks and chooses his runs, and he's a more intelligent football player. I don't know, maybe that time off the pitch has allowed him to be more intelligent with the way that he plays the game on the pitch, learning off of people. But I've been really impressed with his opening 2 performances of the season, and he's definitely a player that Celtic can rely on, but I wouldn't want them to be relying on him to start 40, 50 games a season. That's not the ideal position that I would want the club to be in at this moment in time.
No,
a great player off the bench, though.
Yeah, and just thinking about, because I think the Falkirk game does play into all this in the preparation for the European game. John Clements asked it, making the point, think Simpson Pusey will play on Friday night and protect CCV for the Champions League tie. Our worries is the lack of chances created in their last 2 games. There's an element of truth to that. Now, Friday to Wednesday is not, I don't think it's a big, I think Brendan Rodgers will see that as a positive in terms of the amount of load that's in his players. I had a look at the game against Hibernian on the 18th of August last year, a very early cup round, And Brendan Rodgers actually went with a pretty strong... And now I know Hibs could be considered a tougher test, but Falkirk are now a top flight side as well. So I'm just going to throw up the team from that game against Hibernian, and I think you'll see here it was a strong team. You know, it was a first choice team. But granted, there was no qualifier coming on the back of it, you know, so I think it's interesting to see what team Brendan Rodgers will go with on Friday night. There was no direct European tie after this fixture, for example, but I think even that team is much stronger than what Celtic have at the moment. Matt O'Reilly's in the team, and Nicholas Kuhn's in the team. Forrest does start that one. But yeah, it's just, I think Brendan Rodgers might go for a bit of a stronger lineup than some might expect, because he's talked about this is still early stages of the season. His team are still building sharpness and fitness, and he actually wants these games being played, and that's a key reason why Celtic didn't postpone the Livingston game.
Yeah, I think it's important for the players to get minutes in their legs, because it's still the start to a new season and you want them to be as fresh as possible, especially coming into that Champions League double-header against Kairat. The thing, that 5 days, you know, if it was 3 days between their game and then the Champions League, then maybe you would see some changes. But the fact that it's 5 days, as you say, that's quite a long gap between games. So in my head, I'm trying to think of like a predicted 11 that I think is going to play tomorrow, and I would like to see some rotation in certain areas. But with the 5 days in between, Rodgers could just go with the same or as strong as possible and then change it after 60 minutes if hopefully, you know, I'm expecting a difficult game tomorrow, but if the job is done within 60 minutes, he can then rotate and bring players into the fray. He could go anyway, to be honest, with this. It's such a weird kick-off on a Friday into the Wednesday. It's a difficult one to judge. I think predicted 11s will be quite interesting in that regard, because he could go one way or he could go the other way. It'll be interesting to see what he goes with on tomorrow night.
Yeah, Hazel making the point, my problem with the board is selling players before finding a replacement. No business around the world should be letting that happen. Crazy. I think there's an element of truth to that. I think from Rodgers' perspective, I think what Rodgers would say on that is that he doesn't really want players around who don't want to play for Celtic. And Ange was the same. Yeah. You know, Ange Postecoglou, as soon as a player indicated they want to leave, Ange was like, right, that's it, you're away. Like, you're just
they
not
were probably
involved.
Gone before they even indicated, because he had some sort of sixth sense that knew when a player was heading for the exit.
Yeah, Tam PTV just clarifying what you meant earlier. Yeah, that's what I mean, John. But my overall point is that Kuhn wasn't irreplaceably good. I think there's an element of truth to that. I think we can replace him in the transfer
market. Yeah, I would agree
market.
with that point.
A competent board would have us in a place where we weren't sitting here saying we could do with Kuhn back. I think that's a good point, I think. Listen, one more thing I want to talk about today is just some comments from Benjamin Siegrist he made on a podcast, which I think highlights perhaps some of the frustrations that are going on around Celtic in terms of their dealings with different clubs and players, etc., etc. Now, you can take or leave these comments. Now, I know Benjamin Siegrist also wasn't a standout performer for Celtic. There might be an element of that. You know, the way he tells it on this podcast is that him and Brendan Rodgers came to an agreement that he would be leaving Celtic, and Brendan Rodgers told him that he didn't really have a future in his team for various reasons, that he just wasn't adapting to how he wanted the goalkeeping position to function, and that Benjamin Siegrist could move on. Now, from that point onwards, Benjamin Siegrist was pretty annoyed with how it then transpired. So I'm going to throw up these quotes. These are from the Bondi podcast it's been going around the media today. So Benjamin Siegrist said, I had another team going for a league in another country, a top division, playing European football. I was on holiday. Everything was agreed. Then I found out that Celtic hadn't responded to that team in 4 weeks. I did everything, pushed everything. I spoke to Stevie Woods. He said, in January, you can go. I spoke to the new team, spoke to everyone. It was a done deal. I was ready to pack up. Some people on the Celtic board just didn't respond to any of the inquiries from the other team. There was never a problem between me and Brendan Rodgers. It was always very respectful, but there were things going on internally. The message I got from the manager wasn't the same that I got from the board. So, not ideal there. Leading into this idea that there's a bit of a disconnect between the footballing department and the speed or efficiency of how the negotiating team goes about their business on the Celtic board. Now, I'm not suggesting that Benjamin Siegrist should have been the top of the Celtic board's priorities at the time. I don't know what was going on around any given time. But it's not a great look. Again, it just feeds into this bad optics, Ryan. It's a bad look for this negotiating team at Celtic who tried to conclude deals both in and out of the club.
Yeah, that's the timing's all over the place. So pick your timing when Celtic are going through a little bit of a blip in the transfer window for these comments to come out about how the board do their business. I mean, the fact that and you're taking Benjamin Siegrist's word for this, because obviously there's three sides. There'll be Benjamin Siegrist's side, there'll be the board's side, and the truth, which might be somewhere in the middle. It's not ideal timing hearing that the deal was ready to be done, and then Celtic didn't reply for 4 weeks. From the outside looking in, that just looks quite shoddy, to be honest. I was actually, I don't know about you, John, I was quite excited when Benjamin Siegrist came to the club originally, because I thought he always played quite well against Celtic. Was a little bit, maybe the one question mark I had was how good was he with the ball at his feet for Ange Postecoglou's style of play. But he was second choice goalkeeper for the first, I believe it was the first half of the season, and then he was out of the team. Scott Bain was back as the second choice goalkeeper. A really confusing transfer from start to finish. I think we only seen him maybe once or twice. I think he played a League Cup game and that was it. But yeah, one of those ones that he played a couple of games for Celtic and then left. But those quotes aren't great, especially with what's going on just now with the lack of incomings. If that's the way they're working with outgoings, then you worry about what Celtic are doing with incomings as well and the speed at which they do it. But like I said, this is only one side of the whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Siegrist in general, I mean, I don't think too much about backup goalkeepers. I'm really pleased that Celtic seem to have a very competent backup goalkeeper in Valjami Sinisalo. It is important to have that in place, but in terms of like the third and fourth choice, it goes in and out of my head, to be honest. But I think Siegrist's comments are notable just because it gives an insight into maybe how things function a little bit behind the scenes at Celtic. Now, it should be noted that this summer, I think the outgoings have actually been positive. So Scott Bain's obviously left the club. Naroski left on loan. Lagerbielke left. So Luis Palma left on loan. Quan's away as well. So I think Celtic had done actually a good job of getting some of the players who aren't featuring out this summer. So I think that should be noted. And volume coming in, it's not been the type of deal that we've really been wanting. I think you could only say that really Tierney and Benjamin Siegrist, potentially Jemai Simpson-Pusey will have a real positive impact on the first team this season. Shin Yamada, I think there's he could go either way, but I think there's hope that he can find some sort of form for Celtic. I don't think it's the problem with the volume of deals getting done this summer for me. I think it's more the hesitance or the lack of ability to conclude the higher value of target that seems to have been identified by the scouting team and Rodgers at the start of the summer.
Yeah, it's quality rather than quantity, because on the outside looking in, 7 signings this summer. If all of them would be first team ready, first team signings, then nobody would be complaining, because essentially everywhere would be improved ahead of this new season, ahead of the Champions League qualifiers as well. But a lot of those signings, Callum Osmond, despite doing well for the B team the other night, he's one for the future. Shin Yamada, there's question marks over can he do it instantly at Celtic. Simpson-Pusey, loan deal. Benjamin Siegrist looks to be a standout, and Kieran Tierney, you're getting from him obviously just the question marks over his fitness and conditioning. But yeah, if there was 7 first team players through the door, nobody would be complaining. But the fact that they're signing, so-called project players as well and players for the future, I think that's maybe where the annoyance is coming from. Quality rather than quantity would be good for me, and I just hope that the next few signings that Celtic bring in between now and the end of the window are players that can come in and immediately make a difference in the first team squad, because there's areas that badly need reinforcements and strengthening.
Ross Evans putting across his view. Everything seems to be done by committee. We need someone in charge that can make decisions and get things done. When it's everyone's responsibility, it's no one's responsibility. I think there's an element of truth to that. I think sometimes you need a figurehead to enact change or enact decisions. And there's no doubt that I think everyone at Celtic wants Celtic to be better, but I think there's a lack of visible accountability for me, and I think it goes too high in the hierarchy in terms of concluding these deals. I do think Celtic need someone in there troubleshooting all of this for them, who has the power and the trust of the board to work in conjunction with the football department. Michael Nicholson's probably got a lot on his plate at Celtic and a lot of things to run at Celtic. And I think we just need a more specialised football negotiation, transfer negotiation in place that bridges the gap between the football department and the board. That's the way I see it. That's just my opinion. I'm just an outside punter, but from the outside looking in, it just seems that there is a kind of hesitancy or an inability to get things done.
And we've both said from the outside looking in a number of times on this morning briefing, but that's all we've got. It's about optics, and the optics just don't look positive in the transfer window in terms of first team quality coming through the door, apart from a number of notable exceptions have already made a tangible impact on the first team, which is great to see. But Celtic need more. They need more ahead of this new season, both domestically and in the Champions League or whatever European competition that they play in. I just feel as if now there seems to be a sort of silent acceptance from the supporters that not a lot of business is going to get done. Obviously, there won't be a lot of business done because now it's Thursday, the 14th of August, in terms of before that first game against Kairat. The clock is ticking towards that first deadline, and then the second deadline would mean there's only 2 additional players that could get registered. I just feel as if now there was a lot of annoyance over the past couple of weeks with the lack of transfers, first team transfers. Now, yes, you're still getting a little bit of annoyance on social media, you're getting people frustrated, but it's a lot quieter. There seems to be an acceptance
I think it's just an acknowledgement that even if Celtic made 2 signings today or whatever, or 2 signings before Tuesday or whatever, they're not going to. I don't think they're going to make a tangible impact to this first leg, and the first leg is so crucial. They're not going to be up to speed in the way that Brendan Rodgers works. So, I think there's an acceptance of that things have happened the way they've happened. I don't think many people are happy about it. You do see comments, you do see some supporters kind of going, "Listen, the Celtic, it might develop, and Celtic might get the players in the door." And if people want to believe that and feel that and believe that, then they're valid to do so. I think from what I can see, most people are concerned about the strength of Brendan Rodgers' attack because Brendan Rodgers is concerned about the strength of his attack and says so publicly. Listen, that's where we're at. I think we're in wait and see mode now. We're going to wait and see how Celtic play against Kairat. We're going to see if Celtic can get through this tie, and then people will make determinations on the back of that. I think some key figures at Celtic badly need Celtic to get through this tie, or there's going to be very serious question marks and very serious criticism of how this summer has been handled. And that's all to play out in time if that occurs. But nobody's hoping for that to happen. Everyone's hoping that Celtic get through this and book their place in the league phase because the Champions League's so exciting and we love it, and that's where we are. And that's where we are. And I guess everyone can just take a deep breath, maybe stop worrying about transfers for a week and see how Celtic play in this first leg, and hopefully we blow the Kazakh champions away at Celtic Park.
Yeah, I don't think, unless it's a really adverse result, then I don't think anybody will be talking about transfers during that game, because it's all focus on the players that are there, the players that are available and ready to face off against Kairat Almaty. Such a massive tie, and I think just for what Champions League football brings to the season as a whole, it's so important that Celtic get through. That's, as much as the domestic league will be exciting this year with new challenges coming in the form of Hearts, and Hibs are looking decent as well, the Champions League is really where it's at for Celtic. That's got to be their long-term goal, is to improve in that competition year on year, because as I said before, that's where the excitement is. Those big teams coming to Celtic Park, those away trips, travelling to all these different countries and these massive stadiums in different European places. Yeah, it's where the excitement is, and we're just hoping that Celtic can get there. But
it was also exciting, I think, playing 8 different teams. And
oh yeah, it was completely rejuvenated.
A real variety of opponent. I think that really energised supporters last year. The season in those early months up to the Bayern tie, they were very varied. There was lots of talking points. There was lots of different teams, lots of different style of teams, and Celtic held their own in that environment, and it was magic. And I think it's just for the morale of the support as much as anything. The finances aside, we've not even talked about the financial implications. People do think about that, but for the supporters' morale and their energy and their excitement for the season ahead, it's just massive. And the early doors where it's looking like the Scottish Premiership, we're yet to see how that plays out in terms of competitiveness, but Celtic have certainly started strongly, other teams haven't. And yeah, Europe is the thing that lifts Celtic at the moment, lifts Celtic to another level, to the level that I think that the majority of fans want to see Celtic at. This is this is what Celtic's all about in this modern age, is pushing forward, making advancements in Europe. I don't think the ambition's been there from some figures at the club in response to that. And I think this is where the frustration lies. But plenty to look forward to, Ryan. Listen, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for all your comments in the live chat. Thanks for all your comments below if you're checking this out later. As I say, there's lots coming up today. We'll have full coverage of Brendan Rodgers' press conference on celticway.co.uk. We'll have a written squad depth analysis going up on the site later as well. If you want to subscribe to the Celtic Way as a website, it's currently £1 for 6 months. A full 6 months for just a single £1. You get access to all our premium articles, all our news ad-free. You get a bespoke app, which is fantastic to use. Certainly worth checking out. It's very good value for money, everyone. I know we push it on the channel, but it's a genuinely good deal for people to get £1 for 6 months of the Celtic Way, and subscription numbers really help us in what we do and what we do on a daily basis. So even if you just like our videos and you don't even check out the website, that £1 for 6 months goes a long way to helping us and keeping things going. So I would very much appreciate if you go to celticway.co.uk/subscribe and give myself and Ryan and everyone else at the Celtic Way your support. On the channel later, out with the website, we've got this Falkirk preview with the Falkirk Daft podcast that I was speaking to. They give their perspective on where Falkirk's set at the moment. So that's an interesting chat if you're wanting some direct chat about tomorrow. And we'll be back for a morning briefing tomorrow. We'll be back with live coverage of tomorrow's match as well. So lots of videos coming up on the website, lots of articles coming up on the website. And yeah, lots to look forward to. Ryan, thanks for joining me today. I hope you're well. And we'll see you again next time on the Celtic Way, everyone.
Cheers, guys.